It's funny how we tend to look at the people around us, at our coworkers, our neighbors, our friends, and we assume that because they earn roughly the same amount of money as we do, they must be living roughly the same kind of life. We see the guy in the next cubicle who drives a slightly newer car, or the friend who always seems to be buying the latest tech gadget, and we think, okay, they're doing fine. They're winning. We equate income with wealth. We see the paycheck coming in, and we assume that the number at the top of the stub tells the whole story. But if you've ever sat down with someone who looks rich on paper only to find out they're drowning in debt, or if you've ever met someone who lives modestly but could write a check for a house tomorrow without blinking, you know there's a massive disconnect. I was actually at a coffee shop last week, just a regular Tuesday afternoon, and I overheard two guys talking. They were clearly in the same industry, probably similar ages, maybe even worked for the same company. One was complaining about being broke until the next payday, while the other was talking about a rental property he was closing on. It hit me then, same salary, drastically different outcomes. My name is B.O.B., and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and why some people seem to effortlessly build wealth while others stay stuck in the same financial patterns for decades. And the hard truth I've discovered, the one that nobody really likes to admit, is that your salary is almost never the bottleneck. It's not the ceiling that's holding you back. It's the holes in the floor. And that's what we're going to get into today. We're going to look at why two people can walk through the same door, earn the exact same check, and end up in totally different universes 10 years later. It's not magic, and it usually isn't some secret stock pick. It's a series of small, almost invisible choices that compound over time. If you've ever felt like you're working hard but your bank account doesn't seem to reflect that effort, this conversation is going to shift how you look at your money. Trust me, it's not about earning more. It's about keeping more of what you earn and doing it in a way that doesn't feel like you're starving yourself. Let's dive in. So, where does the gap actually start? Where does the money go? Because here's the thing. When you get a job offer for, say, $60,000 a year, you feel like you've made it. You feel like that $60,000 is yours. And to some degree, it is. But if you're not careful, that money gets allocated before you even see it. This leads us to the first major difference between the person stuck in a rat race and the one building wealth. And it's what I call the phantom raise trap. I see this happen constantly. You get a promotion. You get a raise. Maybe you go from making $50,000 to $65,000. That's a huge jump, right? That's $15,000 more a year. You should be $15,000 richer. But what happens? Most people immediately, almost instinctively, upgrade their life. They move to a slightly nicer apartment because, hey, I earned it. They lease a slightly better car because they don't want to be seen in that old beater anymore. They start ordering delivery a little more often because they're tired from the new responsibilities. This is lifestyle creep, and honestly, it's the silent killer of wealth. It's insidious because it feels justified. You did earn it. You are working harder. But the problem is, once you upgrade your baseline expenses to match your new income, you haven't actually gotten richer. You've just increased the cost of your lifestyle. The person who ends up with a different net worth, the one who's actually building wealth, understands something critical. A raise is an opportunity to widen the gap, not close it. Let's look at the numbers for a second. If you get that $15,000 raise, and you take home maybe $10,000 of it after taxes, and you immediately spend that $10,000 on a nicer car and a bigger apartment, your net worth hasn't moved an inch. You're running on a treadmill, moving your legs faster but not going anywhere. The wealthy person? They take that same raise, and they pretend it never happened. They keep living on $50,000. They keep driving the old car. They keep the apartment. And they take that entire $10,000 post-tax raise and they dump it into an investment account, or they pay off debt, or they just let it sit in a high-yield savings account until they have a plan for it. That is the divergence point. That one decision, deciding to keep your lifestyle fixed while your income grows, is the single most powerful wealth-building tool you have. It feels weird. It feels like you're depriving yourself. But you're not. You're paying your future self. And here's the hard truth. If you can't control your spending when you're making $50,000, you won't be able to control it when you're making $150,000. You'll just be buying more expensive stuff and feeling the exact same amount of stress. The first step to changing your net worth is deciding that your lifestyle does not automatically have to rise every time your paycheck does. Freeze your life. Upgrade your savings. Now, let's move on to something a bit more psychological, because money isn't just math, it's feelings. And one of the biggest reasons people with the same salary end up in different places comes down to how they handle the invisible spending. I'm talking about the small, frictionless purchases that we don't even think about. We live in an economy designed to pick our pockets $5 at a time. Subscription services, the small upsize at the drive-thru, the app where you tap a button and a car shows up, or the app where you tap a button and food shows up. It is so incredibly easy to spend money now. In the past, you had to physically go to a bank, take out cash, and hand it over. There was pain involved. There was friction. You felt the money leaving your hand. Now, it's just a tap on a piece of glass. It doesn't feel real. And this is where the different net worth starts to bleed out drop by drop. I have a friend. Let's call him Mark. Mark makes great money, but Mark cannot hold on to cash to save his life. He subscribes to every streaming service known to man. He gets coffee 3 times a day because it's just $7, right? He buys video games on Steam just because they're on sale, even if he doesn't play them. None of these purchases look dangerous on their own. A $7 coffee isn't going to bankrupt you. But when you add them up, when you look at the monthly aggregate of that micro spending, it turns out he's bleeding about $800 a month on nothing. Just stuff that vanishes. On the flip side, you have the person who is hyper-aware of this leakage. They're not necessarily cheap, they're just intentional. They might still buy the coffee, but maybe they make it at home 4 times a week and buy the fancy one once as a treat. They audit their subscriptions once a month. They ask themselves, does this actually add value to my life? The hard truth here is that being broke often feels like a math problem, like you just need more numbers coming in, but it's usually a behavior problem. It's the death by 1,000 cuts. If you want a different net worth on the same salary, you have to become a guardian of your small money. You have to respect the $5 bill just as much as you respect the $500 bill. Because if you don't respect the small money, the big money will never stay with you long enough to matter. This brings us to a really interesting concept that changes the game entirely. And it's the difference between looking rich and being wealthy. There's a quote that I love. I think it's from the book The Millionaire Next Door. And it says something like, "Big hat, no cattle." It's about people who project an image of success, but have no actual substance behind it. We live in a culture that is obsessed with the outward appearance of wealth. We see the Instagram photos of the first-class flight, the designer watch, the steak dinner. We assume the balance sheet matches the lifestyle. But often, it's the exact opposite. Think about it. If you see someone driving a brand new, fully loaded luxury car that costs $80,000, what do you assume? You assume they're successful. But think about the math. Unless they paid cash, which is rare, they have a monthly payment. They have higher insurance premiums. They have expensive maintenance requirements. That car is a liability. It is taking money out of their pocket every single month. Meanwhile, the person driving the 10-year-old Honda Civic, who you might not look twice at, they might have $200,000 in the stock market because they chose to drive a paid-off beater and invest the difference. This is the hard truth. I want to emphasize, wealth is what you don't see. Wealth is the money you haven't spent. It's the investments compounding in the background. It's the lack of debt. 2 people, same salary. One decides to signal status to the world. They buy the luxury car, the expensive clothes, the fancy apartment. They look successful. But every month, their net worth is stagnant or worse, negative because they're servicing all that debt. The other person decides to play the long game. They live in a modest place. They drive a modest car. They don't care what the neighbors think. They pour that extra money into assets, things that pay them, like stocks or real estate or their own side business. The divergence here is emotional maturity. It takes a lot of confidence to drive an older car when you can afford a new one. It takes a lot of internal security to wear the same clothes you wore last year. But that confidence pays off, literally, because while the person trying to impress the world is working to pay for their depreciating toys, the quiet wealth builder is letting their money work for them. And after 5 or 10 years, the gap is massive. The guy in a Honda owns the building the guy in the BMW rents in. That's not an exaggeration. That is the reality of compound interest working in favor of the saver and against the debtor. If you want to change your net worth, you have to stop playing the status game. You have to realize that the people you're trying to impress probably don't care. And if they do, they're not the people whose opinions should matter to your financial future. Let's talk a little bit about the savings rate, because this is the mathematical engine that drives the whole thing. When we look at two people with the same salary, the percentage of that salary they save is the variable that dictates their future. It's not the absolute number, it's the percentage. If you make $100,000 a year and you save $5,000, you have a 5% savings rate. If you make $50,000 a year and you manage to save $5,000, you have a 10% savings rate. Who is going to be richer? The person making $50,000, because they have mastered the art of living below their means. I know it sounds boring. Save more money, B.O.B., groundbreaking advice. But hang with me here. The reason this is the hard truth is that most people view savings as what's left over at the end of the month. You pay the rent, you pay the car, you pay the utilities, you buy the food, you go out for the weekend, and whatever is left, maybe $50, you put into savings. That is the wrong order. That is how you stay broke. The people with the high net worths, even on modest salaries, they pay themselves first. They treat their savings contribution like a bill that must be paid. The moment the paycheck hits, 10%, 20%, maybe even 30% gets whisked away immediately to an investment account before they have a chance to touch it. This changes your psychology. It forces you to adapt your lifestyle to the remaining money. It forces you to be creative. It forces you to say no to things that don't matter so you can say yes to things that do. If you wait until the end of the month to save what's left, I promise you there will be nothing left. Life has a way of expanding to fill the vacuum of your bank account. There's always an emergency, always a birthday, always a sale. By automating your savings and treating it as a non-negotiable expense, you're prioritizing your future freedom over your current comfort. And that is the fundamental trade-off of personal finance. You can either have the comfort now and worry later, or you can be disciplined now and have freedom later. The two people with the same salary? One is choosing comfort, one is choosing freedom. Now, I want to touch on something that is rarely discussed, but is absolutely huge: the guilt-free spending concept. You might be listening to this and thinking, okay, B.O.B. so, I just have to live like a monk? I can never have fun? I have to eat rice and beans until I'm 60. No, that is not what I'm saying. In fact, the people who are too restrictive often end up binge spending later and wrecking their progress. The difference between the two net worths isn't that one spends nothing and the other spends everything. It's that the wealthier person spends consciously. Let's go back to our two friends with the same salary. The one who is struggling spends money reactively. They spend because they're stressed. They spend because they're bored. They spend because they're sad. They spend because their friends are spending. There is no plan. It's emotional spending. The other person? They have a line in their budget for guilt-free fun. They know exactly how much they can spend on hobbies, dining out, travel, or whatever brings them joy without derailing their goals. And when they spend that money, they enjoy it. They savor it. They don't have a nagging voice in the back of their head saying, I shouldn't have bought this. This is psychological, but it affects the bank account. When you spend without a plan, you usually spend more than you think. You lose track. You wake up the next day with spender's remorse, which leads to more stress, which leads to more spending to comfort yourself. It's a vicious cycle. The person with the high net worth breaks that cycle by giving themselves permission to spend within limits. It's not about deprivation, it's about allocation. You're allocating your resources to the things that actually matter to you. If you love travel, save for travel and cut back on eating out. If you love food, budget for incredible meals and cut back on clothes. If you don't care about cars, don't drive a nice one. Spend extravagantly on what you love and cut costs mercilessly on what you don't. That is how you sustain wealth building over the long term without burning out. I also need to mention the time horizon, because this is where the magic really happens. The person who ends up with $1 million portfolio usually started thinking about that portfolio 20 years ago. The person living paycheck to paycheck is thinking about next weekend. The difference in net worth is often just a difference in time perspective. I remember reading about the concept of time arbitrage. Essentially, it means looking at the world through a different time lens than everyone else. Most people are playing short game. They want the dopamine hit now. They want the new phone now. The wealthy builder is playing the infinite game. They are willing to delay gratification for years because they understand the math of compounding. $10,000 invested today isn't just $10,000 in 30 years, depending on the return. It could be $100,000 or more. Every dollar you spend today isn't just a dollar gone. It's the $5, $10, or $20 it could have become if you had let it grow. This is hard. It is genuinely hard because our brains are wired for immediate survival, not long-term compounding. We're not naturally good at this. But the person who succeeds is the one who hacks their own brain. They automate the investing so they don't have to rely on willpower. They visualize their future self. They realize that the you of 10 years from now is just as real as the you of today, and they owe that future person a decent life. It's a shift in identity. You stop identifying as a consumer who needs to buy things to validate their existence, and you start identifying as an owner, a builder, an investor. That mental shift, more than any stock tip, is what separates the net worths. And finally, let's talk about the environment. Because you could do everything right, but if you're surrounded by people who drag you down, it's going to be an uphill battle. I've noticed this so much in my own life. You have the two people with the same salary. Let's say they both work at a tech firm. One of them hangs out with a crowd that talks about flipping houses, tax strategies, and side hustles. The other one hangs out with a crowd that talks about which bottles of vodka to buy at the club, which new cars are fastest, and who got the most expensive bottle at dinner. Who do you think is going to have the higher net worth? The person surrounded by wealth-building ideas or the person surrounded by consumption ideas? It's subtle, but your environment programs your subconscious. If normal in your world is spending $200 on a Friday night, then spending $200 feels normal. If normal in your world is putting $200 into an index fund on a Friday night, then that feels normal. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. It's a cliche because it's true. The hard truth here is that you might need to outgrow your current circle. Or at the very least, you need to find a community, whether it's online, a local meetup, or just one like-minded friend. We're talking about savings rates, and investing is encouraged, not mocked. If everyone around you calls you cheap because you don't want to split a $500 bottle service, that's going to wear you down. You need people who get it. You need people who will high-five you when you hit a savings milestone, not look at you like you're weird. This is a huge, often overlooked factor in the same salary, different net worth equation. One person is fighting gravity, the other has the wind at their back. So, where does all of this leave us? We've talked about lifestyle creep, invisible spending, the difference between looking rich and being wealthy, the savings rate, conscious spending, time horizon, and environment. It's a lot, but it all boils down to one simple, hard truth. Your net worth is not a reflection of your income. It is a reflection of your habits and your values. Two people can stand side by side, earning the exact same amount, living in the same city, working the same job. One can be free, and one can be a slave to their lifestyle. The difference isn't luck. It's choice. It's the choice to pay yourself first. It's the choice to ignore the status game. It's the choice to be okay with being boring with your money today, so you can be incredible with your life tomorrow. I want you to walk away from this video feeling empowered, not guilty. If you look at your bank account right now and you realize you're the one with the car payment and the empty savings account, that's okay. That's today. It doesn't have to be tomorrow. The beauty of this hard truth is that the moment you change your behavior, the moment you decide to stop the bleeding and start the building, your trajectory changes instantly. You don't have to wait for a raise. You can start closing the gap on your very next payday. Audit your subscriptions. Cancel the ones you don't use. Look at your car payment and ask yourself if it's